Nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. Not because pain no longer exists, but because you've stopped handing others the weapon. Because the truth is, most of what hurt you didn't come from the event. It came from the meaning you gave it, from the access you allowed, from the story you told yourself afterward, that you were weak, unworthy, forgotten, or broken. Carl Jung understood this. He understood that pain is not just something that happens to us. It's something we internalize. It doesn't just cut the skin, it shapes the psyche. And if left unchecked, it becomes our identity. But here's the truth that most people miss. You don't get hurt because people are cruel. You get hurt because you attach your worth to how they treat you. You get hurt because you believed the lie, that you are only as valuable as your acceptance, that you are only as safe as your relationships, that love, validation, respect are given to you by others. But Jung would tell you, everything you need is already within you. You don't need to be chosen to feel worthy. You don't need to be praised to feel strong. You don't need to be understood to feel real. You just need to reclaim what you gave away, because you've been giving people the sharpest tools to hurt you. Your silence, your loyalty, your empathy, your constant need to be good, to be enough, to be kept. But today, something shifts. You stop handing out the keys. You stop trying to be understood by those who aren't even listening. You stop bleeding for people who wouldn't notice if you disappeared. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. It's about recognizing that the more you abandon yourself to protect others, the more vulnerable you become to them. Carl Jung said, "A man is not hurt so much by what happens as by his opinion of what happens." And that opinion, that story, it's under your control now. So let's go back. Let's look at every wound, the relationship that left you feeling like you weren't enough, the parent who made love feel like something you had to earn, the friend who disappeared when you needed them most, the betrayal, the shame, the moment you stopped trusting the world and started blaming yourself. That was the moment you learned the wrong lesson, that you had to be more, to be safe, that you had to perform, to be accepted, that you had to sacrifice your truth to avoid being abandoned again. But now you know, that's not protection. That's self-erasure. And if you keep doing it, if you keep editing yourself to avoid pain, you'll live your entire life surrounded by people who only love the performance, not the real you, not the deep you, not the one who says no, not the one who sets boundaries, not the one who refuses to explain their soul. So here's the shift. You stop asking, why did they hurt me? And you start asking, why did I keep handing them access to my softest places? Because that's where real power begins. Not in avoiding pain, but in becoming unhurtable. Not because you've shut down, but because you've woken up. You now realize, not everyone deserves your vulnerability. Not everyone gets to hear your fears. Not everyone earns the right to affect your mood, your day, your identity. And when you truly embrace that, you stop flinching. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You just become still. And in that stillness, you find your shield, not one made of armor, but one made of clarity. Because once you know who you are, nobody can touch you. You're not afraid of rejection, because you no longer beg to belong. You're not afraid of betrayal because you don't overinvest in what's inconsistent. You're not afraid of being alone because solitude no longer feels like punishment. It feels like home. That's the power Carl Jung spoke of, the power of the integrated self, the person who has looked at their shadow, their darkness, their fear, their neediness, and said, I see you, but you don't get to run my life anymore. And when you do that, you don't just protect yourself from others, you protect yourself from you, the old you, the impulsive you, the people-pleasing you, the version of you that believed the only way to be loved was to be smaller. That version is gone now. You've outgrown the need to be chosen. You've outgrown the need to be understood. You've outgrown the need to chase peace in other people. You've realized the truth. Nothing and nobody can hurt you, unless you allow it. Because your energy is no longer open to the unqualified. Your time is no longer spent defending your worth. Your presence is no longer free. And that's what they feel now. The weight of your absence, the silence of your healed wounds, the chill that comes when someone realizes they no longer have access to you. Not because you're cruel, but because you've closed the door that should never have been opened. You used to think boundaries were mean. Now you know they're medicine. You used to think walking away was failure. Now you know it's self-respect. You used to think being soft made you weak. Now you know softness without standards is self-destruction. And this clarity, it changes everything. Because now you don't fight to prove your value. You embody it. You don't explain your distance. You own it. You don't tolerate behavior that threatens your peace, not because you're angry, but because you're done negotiating with chaos. This is what Jung meant when he said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And now, you choose to become untouchable, not in arrogance, but in alignment. You choose to become someone who no longer lives in emotional debt, someone who no longer bleeds for people who never brought a bandage, someone who doesn't wait to be seen because they've already witnessed themselves. And when you reach that point, nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again, because you no longer abandon yourself to keep others close, because now your peace no longer depends on the behavior of others. Let that settle. Your peace is no longer a transaction. It's not earned through approval. It's not maintained by walking on eggshells. It's not gifted to you by people who barely understand you. It's yours. Built, not borrowed. Integrated, not inherited. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke about the self. Not the mask you wear, not the roles you play, but the deep, immovable core of who you are, the part of you that's been buried beneath all your efforts to be liked, to be needed, to be safe. Because the truth is, most people have confused safety with surrender. They think keeping the peace means staying silent when disrespected. They think being kind means never having boundaries. They think being spiritual means tolerating energy that drains them. But what Jung understood is this: until you stop abandoning yourself in the name of connection, you will keep getting hurt by the same types of people in the same ways over and over again. Not because you're cursed, not because the world is evil, but because you haven't healed the part of you that invites it. Let's be brutally honest. You've been too open, too emotionally accessible, too willing to see the good in people who never earned your softness. And what did that get you? Confusion, disrespect, disappointment. Why? Because people don't respect what they didn't earn. They don't value what's always available. They don't protect what you let them access for free. This is where emotional sovereignty begins. You stop giving people discounts on your energy. You stop over-explaining what should be obvious. You stop begging to be understood. And you start observing who makes the effort to understand you without being asked. And the ones who don't? They fall away. Let them. Because now you're no longer afraid of being alone. You're afraid of being drained. You're afraid of being small. You're afraid of betraying yourself one more time in the name of being good. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But becoming who you truly are, that requires risk. It requires walking away from every dynamic that feeds off your silence. It requires standing in front of the mirror and asking, where did I learn to tolerate this much? And then answering honestly, not as a victim, but as someone ready to take responsibility for their healing. Because healing isn't just feeling better. Healing is realizing that you are no longer the same person who once allowed the chaos. You no longer chase closure. You no longer crave apologies. You no longer need someone to understand your worth before you decide to protect it. You just stop. Stop responding to people who only check in when they need something. Stop explaining your boundaries to those who keep stepping over them. Stop showing up for people who disappear the moment you stop performing. This is the beginning of freedom. But it's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's subtle. It's the text you don't reply to. The phone call you let ring. The conversation you don't initiate anymore. Not because you're angry, but because you're finally aware. Aware of who you are. Aware of what you need. Aware of the patterns you've repeated and the power you now have to break them. And when that awareness becomes your new baseline, you no longer live in reaction. You live in response. You respond to life with intention. You choose who gets access. You choose what gets your energy. You choose how far someone can reach into your peace. And most importantly, you choose you. Not the old version of you who tried to earn love by bleeding for it, but the new you, the one who loves quietly, but fiercely, who protects their peace like it's sacred, who gives less, but means more. Because now, your value is no longer negotiable. It's not up for debate. It's not a performance. It's a presence. You walk into rooms differently. You speak with less urgency. You no longer argue to be right, because silence has become your strongest statement. And people feel it. They feel the weight of your boundaries. They feel the shift in your tone. They feel that you've returned to yourself, and you're not available for anything less than mutuality. Not mutual effort, not mutual words, but mutual respect. And respect, real respect, begins the moment you stop giving it to those who only know how to consume. That's what Jung taught us. Integration, not suppression, not vengeance, not ego, but integration. You don't need to destroy others to heal yourself. You don't need to retaliate to reclaim your worth. You just need to withdraw what never should have been given away. Because the truth is, nobody really hurt you. They just showed you where you were still hurting yourself, where you still needed validation, where you still feared rejection, where you still believed that love meant losing pieces of yourself. And now, you don't believe that anymore. You believe in wholeness. You believe in emotional privacy. You believe in protecting your nervous system like it's your second heart. So when people ask, what changed? You won't say much. You'll just smile and disappear. Because the healing wasn't loud. It was deep. It was in the moments you cried alone and still chose not to go back. It was in the boundaries you enforced, even when they called you selfish. It was in the silence that used to feel empty and now feels safe. Because now, finally, you're the protector you always needed. And that version of you, they don't get hurt anymore. Not because hurt isn't real, but because pain no longer defines your worth. You define it now. And from that place, nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again. Because now, you are anchored, not externally, in reputation, praise, or popularity, but internally, rooted in self-awareness, grounded in boundaries, centered in truth. Carl Jung called this the journey toward individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you were always meant to be, beneath the roles, beyond the wounds, past the survival masks. And when you get here, to this inner stillness, something strange happens. You stop reacting to chaos. Not because you don't feel it, but because it no longer defines you. You no longer get pulled into their drama. You no longer shrink to fit their expectations. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to rescue people who aren't ready to heal. You just watch. You observe patterns. You see the emotional bait. You hear the manipulation disguised as concern. But you don't bite. Because now you recognize the difference between noise and truth. The noise wants your attention. The truth? It needs nothing. It just is. That's how you've become. Unbothered. Not in arrogance, in authority, not in denial, in discernment. Because now you understand the person who has the power to hurt you the most is the person you've handed the most of yourself to. But now, that access is no longer on autopilot. You no longer overshare in hopes of connection, overgive in hopes of loyalty, overcommit in fear of being forgotten. Because now you move with intention. You give slow. You observe long. You attach consciously, not because you're guarded, but because you're aware. You've stopped calling chaos chemistry. You've stopped chasing closure from people who profit off your confusion. You've stopped waiting for someone else to hand you back the version of you they never valued. You took it back yourself, piece by piece, in silence, in solitude, in choices no one applauded. But that changed everything. Because now, your safety doesn't come from people behaving a certain way. It comes from knowing you'll leave when they don't. Your worth doesn't trick you when someone texts back. Your peace doesn't crumble when someone doesn't get you. Your day isn't ruined by moods, by projections, by passive-aggressive energy in the room. Why? Because you're no longer available to the wound pattern. You've closed the loop. You've faced the part of you that once needed chaos to feel alive. You've faced the part of you that confused anxiety with attraction. You've faced the part of you that wanted to fix what never asked to be healed. And now that you've made peace with it, you don't perform for it anymore. That's how you become unhurtable. Because you're no longer trying to rewrite the past through present people. You're no longer giving old pain a second chance through new faces. You're no longer staying in places just to prove that you're finally lovable enough to not be left. You're already whole. And wholeness doesn't beg. Wholeness doesn't chase. Wholeness doesn't tolerate what feels familiar when it's also what feels wounding. And now that you're whole, everything changes. You start to feel the difference between attention and presence. Between love that feels like safety and love that feels like adrenaline. Between connection based on resonance and connection built on trauma bonding. And you choose differently because the healed version of you is picky, selective, quiet. Not because they're sold, but because they're clear. They don't announce their boundaries. They simply live them. They don't demand respect. They embody it. They don't explain why they disappeared. They just stop attending environments that require them to be someone they're not. That's the power Jung spoke of. The power of integration. When your inner world becomes so cohesive, so grounded, that nothing outside of you can shatter it. It's not that people won't still try. They will. They'll test you, project onto you. Say you've changed. Say you're selfish. Say you've become distant. But you won't flinch, because now you understand. Distance is not disconnection. It's discernment. It's knowing who gets the full you and who gets silence. It's knowing when to engage and when to exit. It's knowing that peace is not found in being loved by everyone. Peace is found in not needing to be. You no longer bend to earn peace. You hold still and let the room shift around you. And those who are meant to stay, they will respect the silence. They will match your emotional pace. They will bring clarity, not confusion. Everyone else, they'll fade. And you'll let them, with grace, without guilt, because you've stopped feeling responsible for everyone's comfort. You've stopped translating your boundaries into softer language. You've stopped carrying the emotional labor of people who refuse to carry their own growth. You've returned home, to yourself, to the part of you that doesn't need to prove anything, to the part of you that knows. The more healed you are, the less reactive you become. And the less reactive you become, the more untouchable you feel. Not because you're closed off, but because you're complete. Because now, nothing and nobody can enter your life by default. They must knock, they must wait, they must align, and if they don't get in. Not because you're punishing them, but because your peace is no longer negotiable.